All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Flipping Rich. My name is Julie Muse, and this is my co-conspirator, Peter Vekselman. So what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're going to be talking about something that I've lost more money in than anything else in real estate, and that is contracting. And I think you want to talk about like priority of what to do, what not to do. You're going to be the expert here. Even though I know you're going to be asking me questions, I think I'm going to be firing these questions right back at you.
Gotcha. Well, today, really, it comes down to always fix what's wrong before you fix what's ugly. And I think a lot of people, when they get into this business, right, or they watch these TV shows and things, they're so worried about the paint colors and the color of the cabinets and the granite or the different countertops, different light fixtures, water features. I know you hear that a lot, right? Like a lot of people want to get in this business for that like interior design aspect.
Well, let's face it. And it's not only just that, that's the easiest, right? Because you could see it. Like someone like me who doesn't understand anything about contracting, I don't want you to say, I don't want to hear from you like, well, the piping, the PVC piping behind the thing is to me like, no. I don't get it. I don't see how that's going to increase. Like I know it needs to be done. And so I think a lot of times the newer people or people like myself that never really get the hang of this thing, we just kind of gravitate towards looking pretty, right? Just looking pretty. Let's, what do you call it? Put a
lipstick on a pig.
Put a lipstick on a pig and let's get this thing sold. And but the reality just doesn't always work like that, right? Because there's inspections and financing contingencies and all that.
Absolutely. So when you're looking to flip a house, and really what I mean by this is a lot of new people get in and they think these other things aren't important, or they spend all of their attention or all of the things to just make the house pretty. When in all actuality, you're going to have to do all the rest of it anyway if you don't the first time. So what we do is, first thing is we have a property inspection done. What's the reason for a licensed property inspector to come out look at your house? Now listen, I'm not talking about your cousin Bob or your, cousin Sam going and looking at the house, seeing what type of work it needs, which could be helpful advice. But why do you hire a licensed home inspector?
Well, I'll tell you, let me just answer it this way. Like, I can't remember, I'm sure it's happened, that I lost money in a deal because it didn't sell at a certain price.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember ever losing money in a deal because, like, I was borrowing at 8% as opposed to 5%. I can't ever remember losing money in a deal because it didn't close like in 1 week, it took 4 weeks. There's a lot of moving pieces to real estate. And if you listen to us, you hear us talk about it all the time. But Julie, I could tell you almost 100% of the time where I lost money in this business, and where we've lost money in this business, is the rehab side.
Yeah.
Right? The unknowns, the underbidding, the things that take place behind the walls, all that stuff. And really the bottom line is the reason you do need an inspector is to catch all that. Right?
Absolutely.
To try to at least stay as much in line as possible on exactly what needs to be fixed. And so if at least you're going in there with the proper amount of money. And if anything, maybe even a little bit too much money. But remember, you don't lose money in rehab on the things you see, although I have done that. You lose money in the rehab on the things you don't see, right?
Exactly. And for me, the real thing that comes down to this home inspection. So most of your retail buyers, so after you flip the house, they're going to go and get a loan generally, right? Most people don't have $300,000 or $400,000 cash sitting around. So they're going to go and get maybe a conventional home loan, an FHA loan, a VA loan, or one of those multiple different loan products. Well, almost every time with those loan products, before they lend on the house, they are going to perform an inspection from what? A licensed home inspector, right? You want to know what's on that inspection before you get to the end when you're about to close, don't you?
Yeah. And let's face it, and again, you and I both have been there, you don't want to go in the rears and try to okay, the job is done, but not really. Well, we're finished, but not really. We need to go behind the walls to fix this. our systems aren't working. Because in essence, what you're doing, you're double paying then.
Yep.
Right? If that final inspection is finding a ton of stuff, what you're doing among more time, more effort, more room for error, more expensive on your financing, if you're using that, on top of that, you're literally double paying for a lot of this stuff. So you're
going over budget for sure.
Well, 100%. That's why you need that front end inspection. I mean, my gosh, you and I have stories, right, on things we did not do on the front end, on the rehab side, that cost us dearly on the back end side.
Absolutely. And another thing, too, about knowing, so before we ever even flip a house, we know exactly what's going to come up on this home inspection report because we had the home inspection report before we closed on it. So before we even start or close on the house, everything inside of that report is going to be addressed. And why is that? So that when we go to sell the house, those things don't come up. Now, what a lot of new people do, or even people that's done 20 or 30 of these, you can get away with this by not doing inspection and fixing everything. You can get away with this for a long time. But there's going to become a point in time where you don't get away with it. And I promise you, you do not want to go over budget at the closing table because they're going to say, we're not going to close on this loan until all this stuff is fixed. Right, Pete? So it doesn't matter if you put new floors in the house, new cabinets, new this, new that. If you've got a bad roof on the house, if you've got a heat and air conditioning unit over 20 years old, if you've got polybutylene piping in the house, you've got a problem. If you've got poor electrical, if you've got rotten door frames, rotten windows, all of these things must be addressed. And you know this before you buy. You always enter rehab. Fix what's wrong before you fix what's pretty. So let me ask you this, Peter. Let's say I need to get behind the walls and change some plumbing out, right? Or some electrical. And you know you're going to do that. Is the first thing you're going to do go paint the house?
No.
On the inside?
No. And I'll tell you a story that just literally happened here in the last month or so on one of our deals. I think it was in Orlando. And it happened inadvertently, but this is a perfect example of that. We were literally done. Like, we were done with what started out to be $75,000 rehab, ended up being like $110,000 rehab. We were signed, sealed, and delivered. We were like 3 or 4 days away from listing the property. Remember, everything is done. Everyone's been paid. We're fairly happy with what's taking place. We're going to a listing, right? And, they're taking pictures to the listing, and this is why you don't do what you just said you don't do. All of a sudden, the pipes burst. All of a sudden, the pipes burst. And that pipe, and we were lucky because it just so happened because we were going to a listing. I think somebody was inside that house, and they saw it right away, got a hold of the contractor. He was there within 10, 15 minutes. But that pipe, we didn't fix it out of order, but let's say we would have fixed it out of order, and something like this happened. That issue cost us over $10,000. Cost us over, because everything else was done, right? Guess what? We had to tear things apart. We had to take shelving down. We had to take walls down.
Things that are already pretty are now ugly again.
Are now ugly again. We have to do repainting and all this. So there's no question that, I don't know if this is the right way to say it. You understand this better. And it's like, you got to do the basics first, the foundation of the house first. Yeah, like when it comes to, like, there's an actual order of how you do things. And the major things, the things that need to be done, I guess they have to be done first, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Another thing when we're talking about this that I see is when you're trying to make the numbers work, right? So you purchase it at a certain price. You could sell it at a certain price. Well, what's the variable in the middle when you're flipping a house?
The rehab.
Yep. So what ends up happening is, to make the deal work, what do you start doing? What do people start doing? Start cutting the rehab. And you laugh at that, right?
But I don't laugh, and I don't mean to interrupt you, and I hope this partner doesn't see this, but this is a deal we're doing right now. I think it's somewhere north Pennsylvania, and it's exactly what's taking place. It's a deal that everyone's excited about. The numbers look good, right? And the contractor that we have some faith in came back with a $75,000 rehab. Well, guess what? That $75,000 rehab killed the deal. Well, guess what happened?
Well, we got to tell him why. So why did the $75,000 rehab kill the deal?
Well, because it skewed the numbers. Before, the numbers made sense on what we thought the rehab number was. But now we went from, I think it's a 315 buy, or maybe wrong, maybe 2 or 315 to buy, 75,000 to fix. All of a sudden we went from a 35 to 45% margin. All of a sudden the margin went down to under 20. You and I also know there are no $75,000 rehab. That $75,000 rehab, I will bet the house on it, will probably be somewhere in the 90s, maybe lower hundreds. So bottom line, it just killed the deal. So guess what happened magically 3 days after we got that bid? Our partner that we love on this deal texts me, says, oh, I got good news. That $75,000 rehab is now a $25,000 rehab. Trying to make it work, right?
So coming in, like finding other bids from other people just to make it work.
Just to make
a
it
deal
work.
You've got to force to work is never a deal. It either is or it isn't. If you've got to force it. So that brings up another thing. Man, I've got bids from contractors. By the way, we love working with great contractors. But I wanted a bid, and he literally says to me, what does the number need to be? And I literally about had a heart attack. I'm like, what do you mean, what does the number need to be? The number is what it is. Right? It can't just be what I need it to be. Because on this job, by the way, that needed $75,000 in rehab, I can promise you $25,000 that he's quoting, every bit of that's in materials. Every bit of it. I mean, have you been to anywhere lately to see the cost of materials?
Yep.
I mean, it's expensive.
Yep. And you're right. The reason this rehab gets to be so contentious in so many different ways, it's the only number you can really mess with. What you're not going to mess, like, sales price is the sales price.
I mean, unless you renegotiate it, but that's another day.
Yeah, but still, that's a process that may not always happen, but something that could, like, boom, the number you could fudge all the time. I wasn't even thinking about this, but you're right. The number you could always mess with is the contractor number, right? Get a different contractor, cut corners, don't do what needs to be done, try to paint over something that needs to be fixed. And I could tell you, and I've lived this thing for 2 decades, Julie, it always comes back to bite you.
It does.
Across the board, it comes back to bite you.
It absolutely does. I mean, and really that's what comes down to, fixing what's wrong before fixing what's pretty, because the sexy part of this business is the interior design, getting that finished look.
Yep.
What's not considered sexy is new roofs and heating and air conditioning units and sound floor. That's really the part that's going to get you along. You've got to have an insurable home and something that a lender will actually lend money on. What happens to so many people is actually not that they lose money when they go to put it for sale. When they lose money is here. Okay, they get their rehab done. They go to sell it, and the lender comes back and says, "Ooh, the home inspector came back and said this, and this." So they've already got all their draws.
Right.
I mean, like, this is some serious business, y'all. Meaning they went to a hard money lender.
Yep.
Got the money to buy the house.
Yep.
Got money for the rehab. Let's say it's $50,000. Okay. And they put 20% down, but the 20% they put down on the total loan was all the cash they had to invest in this business. Okay.
Yep.
So they didn't get a home inspection, maybe. They didn't get their bids right because they were fixing what was pretty before they were fixing what's wrong. And then guess what happens?
Dead.
What happens literally, Peter, what happens to people when they're new and they go to sell the house? The lender comes back and says, this house has to have $20,000 more worth of work or we're not lending on it. Now, they could go to a different lender. Chances are the other lenders are going to say the same thing.
Yep.
What happens to the investor when they've put all the 20% down they've got and they've already got their $50,000 in rehab draws that they were supposed to get from their lender, and now it needs another $20K?
Yep.
I mean, what happens?
Well, I could tell you what happens is what happened with me when I got started. I ended up living out of my car because I blew through everything I had. I then went to Mr. and Mrs. Credit Card, Mr. Card, Mr. Visa, and Mrs. MasterCard. I borrowed as much as I could there. Almost all of this money, and by the way, it amounted to almost $750,000 of losses, and almost all of it was accounted to rehab. So what happens is this: either you do what I did, go sink yourself, like desperately sink yourself.
Because you got to sell the house. You can't keep holding on to it
because it costs you money.
Costs too much money.
It costs you money. So you either do what I did, you just sink deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole, or you have to leave the business, or you're just out of business. Kind of you throw your hands up, say, hey, take it back the inventory, take back the house. You already got all my money. And so it's a catastrophic event. It literally is a catastrophic event for investors.
And guys, if we're not trying to scare you into not doing this business. This business is great, right? But there are some things about this business that you can't fudge, and you cannot fudge the numbers. You cannot fudge a rehab. Mm-hmm. You want to know what you're getting into it before you get into it, right? Like if I'm going to go jump into the lake and I'm going to dive into the lake, I'm going to kind of know how deep the water is before I go dive in and break my neck. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think?
100%.
I mean, and the 100%. Same goes for these rehabs. When you're fixing up a house and you're going to sell it, you better know every bit from A to Z what is wrong with that house and what's needed to sell. Because the last thing that we want is for you to be stuck or to not know how deep the water is, right?
And let's face it, and just to kind of piggyback on what you said, and again, I lived it, so I feel more comfortable talking about this. But some of these people, for some of the people, this is an unrecoverable event. It's
on personal credit, on your spirit.
Yep.
I mean, just.
Yep. It becomes an unrecoverable event. It puts people out of business. Mm-hmm. It tarnishes this business. It gets a bad reputation, and really the reality of it is this. There are certain things that you have to do in this business. Mm-hmm. Like there are certain non-negotiables. And what Julie's, the topic that Julie chose for today is one of those. Fixing what needs to be fixed. Fixing what needs to be fixed. There's a priority to how rehabs need to be handled. And if you don't handle them in that priority, then you're going to lose something. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose time. You're going to lose. You may lose the deal. But in real estate, you could only lose so much for most of us because most people have limited resources to keep on losing. And there's nothing that'll wipe you out more quicker than losing in the rehab game. That is absolutely a devastating thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope today's episode of Flippin' Rich will help you in your next flipping adventure. We wish you the most profitable, the best time in this business as possible. So signing out. Bye, everybody.